Missouri lawmakers failed to pass tax credits for childcare, but providers say there is still some good news and relief in the state budget.
Missouri Capitol Bureau Chief Joe McLean explains tonight from Jefferson City.
Those tax credits, which would have made it easier for employers to offer their employees childcare options, never made it to the governor's desk. Still, in the budget, lawmakers were able to increase the amount of childcare subsidy available to low-income families.
The budget passed by state lawmakers still has to be signed by Governor Parson, but it includes more than $78 million to increase money to some daycares.
And just knowing that providers will get paid more, and especially with infant and toddler care, where we know there's the biggest gaps between supply and demand, that those providers will get paid higher, and hopefully will encourage more providers to accept subsidy and start to address some of the supply challenges.
Right now, Missouri's child care subsidy pays about 58 cents for every dollar child care would cost in the market. The budget changes will boost payments to 100% of the market rate for infants and toddlers and to 65% of the market rate for preschool and school-age kids. That subsidy is aimed at parents who want to join the workforce but can't afford child care services in their area or don't have any available. Childcare deserts. That's the case for 80% of Missouri counties, based on a survey last year. In February, the federal government handed down new rules for childcare subsidy programs, including a cap on the rates providers are allowed to charge eligible low-income families. It also changes the way states are to pay providers, including payments based on the number of kids they're authorized to care for rather than attendance.
It was something that the state did during COVID to help stabilize providers, and I think will be a big help to providers going forward. That's one way we can stabilize the system.
As that system continues to limp along, the state's Chamber of Commerce estimates Missouri's economy is losing out on more than $1.3 billion of revenue every single year, and that includes $250 million in lost tax revenue.